Department of IT MRSET. I feel honored to introduce our speaker for the day, Dr. T. Senthil Kumar. Dr. D. Senthil Kumar completed his BTech in Computer Science and Engineering from Setu Institute of Technology, Madurai. He then completed his BTech in Distributed Computing Systems from Pondicherry Engineering College, Pondicherry. He completed his PhD in Information and Communication Engineering from Anna University, Chennai. His areas of interest include video surveillance, deep learning, cloud computing, software engineering, video processing, wireless sensor networks, big data computing, and embedded automation. He's currently working as an associate professor in computer science and engineering department at Amrita School of Engineering, Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetham, Coimbatore. And is also a guiding scholar in areas like video analytics, deep learning, and signal processing. He has received appreciation in Indian Express for agent-based programming for banking domain. His publications in 9 national conferences, 12 international conferences, 14 international journals, and 2 edited book chapters. His publications in 19 Scopus Index publications. He has published a book on C++. Is a reviewer for Elsewhere Computers and Electrical Engineering Journal, IEEE Access, Springer, and many more reputed journals. Is a part of funded projects with IBM, DST, and Ministry of Tribal Affairs. We welcome you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your introduction. So we will set forth the session now. So now I'll share my screen.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Fine. Hope people are able to see my screen. Presentation on. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, thanks to Dr. Sharda ma'am. Thanks to Mumurthy sir and the.
Sir, can you please switch on your video?
Yeah, ma'am. I'm doing it. One second.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Second, ma'am. I'm doing that. Good morning. Can you now see the things? I think my camera is on. We can start the presentation, ma'am. Hello.
Sir, your PPTs are not visible, sir.
Yeah, I'm sharing the PPT, ma'am. I'm sharing. Is it now shared?
Yes, sir.
Hello?
Can you please put it in slideshow, sir?
Yeah, I'm putting.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Okay. So good morning to you all, and my sincere thanks to Dr. Sharda ma'am and Mumurthy sir and the institution for allowing me to present my contents or my discussion area most related to what I'm working now. So today's session, we'll have it in 2 components. One component would be like we would look at how deep learning can be taken with cloud. We will try to see some demonstrations so that you're also able to understand how you can take a real-time data from IoT and try to see the perspective of cloud and deep learning there. Okay. So thank you. So we will start with the things. So first question somebody would ask is like, what is data and why it is so challenging that IoT data has got a lot of difficulties. Usually when you look at an IoT application, as you know, it is Internet of Things. So if you name an application that you want to look at IoT, there are many applications that you can look at IoT here. For example, I'll be going through parallelly with Notepad a couple of files on the net so that you get a feel of, okay, what you can start working also. So the first question somebody would ask is, okay, I'm interested in looking at some data. Then there are many answers to the data here, right? So let's take an example of what a data could be is, right? So if you ask a question, what is my data? So you would say that data is one that I have acquired with my sensors. So it is my IoT data that I've got. So when you say IoT, naturally it has got sensors. Each sensors has got some characteristics and each sensors will give you some values, right? So when you talk about characteristics of the sensors data, then the next question somebody would ask is, what is meant by characteristics of the sensor data? So you would say that interested to my application, I would say I'm looking at sensor which is related to temperature, or I might look at sensors which are related to moisture, right? Or I might be looking at sensors which are having some data which is coming from the camera. So my data is the question here, right? So the data is going to have a lot of sensors, and all the sensors are together are going to give me some meaningful information. Now, once I have got this data, right, which is captured from the sensors, so it could be sensors for temperature or moisture, or maybe data which is coming from the camera, then the next question somebody would ask is, can you process this data and giving me some meaningful information, right? So what is this meaningful information is, I'm interested in making a data store, right? And from that data store, I'm interested to ask some questions from the data store, wherein the questions will be related to what I need from my data. So the questions will give me some answers, right? As each one of you know that you'll get some answers. These answers can be understood as something called as analysis, or these answers can be understood as something in form of analytics, right? So this is the crunch of the entire model development nowadays. What we say is we have data, data is coming from sources. Sources could be sensors, or sources could be data which we have done through crowdsourcing, right? But finally, what I want to do is I would like to do some analysis, or I'm interested in doing some analytics, right? So taking this forward, somebody would say, I'm interested in doing some IoT analysis, right? Or you would say that I'm interested in doing something with IoT analytics, right? So this is always a question, right? For people to understand, okay, what you are interested in saying something called as analysis, and what you're interested in saying something called as analytics, right? To make it interesting or to make it understandable better, right? Let's take a small application from where we can talk about analysis and analytics. Let's take our application to be precision agriculture, right? Let's take our application to be precision agriculture. So we have data. Data is coming from different sensors. So what the sensors could be sensors related to the agriculture. So naturally, we'll have some sensors for temperature. We'll have some sensors for moisture, right? So temperature, sensor for moisture, right? Right. Okay. Then you would say that I have some sensors for humidity. Okay. Right. So I like this, I can have n number of sensors. So I can call my sensors to be as S1 to Sn. Okay. Now each of the sensors are going to give me some values. So now these values are very interesting for me. These values are going to be recorded back for some analysis, right? Okay. So let's open an Excel sheet and understand. Okay. Assume that we have sensors that we have purchased, right? Now the sensors are giving me some live data. So I'm calling the sensors with attributes as S1 to Sn, right? So let me call it like this: sensor 1, sensor 2, sensor 3, sensor 4. Okay, right. Ma'am, are you able to see the Excel sheet? Hello, participants, are you able to see the Excel sheet?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, right, fine. Thank you. So now we have some sensors. Now the question is like, okay, these sensors are going to give me some values. So to make it understandable, let's understand the sensors are going to have some values. So let's take these values are for moisture. Then let's take, you say somebody says temperature. Okay, right. Then we have some sensors which can actually give us a distance, right, between one sensor and the other. So sensors for measuring the distance, right? I'm interested in having some sensors for the humidity, right? Now, once these sensors are now in place, now the next question is, if I have data for the sensors, okay, I'm interested in understanding what this data is. So let's talk about values to the sensors, right? So each sensors again will have some constraints, right? Let's take, I say the moisture can be having a maximum value of 50, right? Let's take the temperature can actually maximum have a value of around, let's take 0 to 100, okay? And distance, I'm putting it in a precision agriculture problem saying that two plants as such may not have a distance of 1 meter, right? So let's take, I say it is between 1 to 100, right? And humidity values around maximum around 23. Let's take it like that. That becomes a value after which the plant cannot survive. Let's take a threshold like that. So the humidity value is between 1 to 23, right? Now, all these are variables that we are now built on the data. So we have 4 sensors, each sensors are giving some values and they have some meaning in the problem: moisture, temperature, distance, humidity. Now I'm interested in understanding what the sensors can give back for analysis, right? For example, now if I have this data coming up live, right? So let's take, I say this data is getting populated. So let's take 56, let's take 34. So here, what happens is this data is a noise, right? Because the maximum value that it can take is 23. And because of some error, it is showing me a value of something called as 34. So I need to look for some approaches that needs to handle my noise in my given data, right? The noise as such is any data which is not relevant to the problem. Any data that is falling away from the threshold of the value is a noise. Humidity is maximum value is 23. So we get 34. So naturally it is called as a noise here, right? So let's take, we start getting the next set of values. So 2, right? Let's take temperature is 34, right? So this is 35, then 23, right? So I'm just building some data so that you get a feel, okay, this is how data might come up in the real time, right? If you have sensors in place. So 4, we have 89, 56, let's take 21, right? So 5, we have 34, 23, 21, 6, okay, so 34, 23, 11, 7, okay, 34, 22, 22. So if you ask yourself how big is your data, is like you would say that my data is actually around 4 to 10 difference, right? So you'll have around 7 records. So my data size is around 7, right? So the number of records here is 7 here. But if you ask a question like, okay, how are you saying this data is dependent? That means one row of data is dependent on the other row, right? How do you put up there? The next question somebody would ask is like, can you include a feature which is meaningful to this? Right? This is where data becomes very big, right? One way of talking about big data is where the data is keeping on increasing in terms of size. Another way of talking about a big data would be like where the data is actually having more number of features. Here, originally we had 4 features. Now we are having 5 features with us, right? So I'm trying to bring in a new feature. Let's take, I say time is my feature, right? So I'm saying now it's 9.1. Okay. So I'm saying 9.2, then 9.3. That means every unique time interval of a timestamp of 1, right? 1 minute I'm measuring the data here, right? So I have 9.5, then I say it is 9.6, then I say it is 9.7, right? So I have around now 7 records. Each records are timestamped at an interval of 1 second, 1 minute here, right? Okay, so this data will become a big data when it is captured over a longer amount of time, because I'm just showing you for 7 minutes, but each one of you know very well that we have a day with 24 hours. Each hour is actually around 60 minutes, right? And if you can measure it, go to seconds. Some problem will say that I'm interested in taking my data in terms of seconds or milliseconds. There it becomes very large and large and large. So this is where a data can actually become a big data in the problem, right? Now, when the data is going live like this, right? When your data is coming live like this, then the next question somebody would ask is, this is just data that is getting populated to the store. Can I actually model the data and say that I'm classifying my data, right? So why do I need to classify my data? I need to understand what is actually happening with respect to the agriculture growth, right? So there it demands saying that this needs a class label, right? Okay. This talks you to saying that, okay, I need some model, right? And using my model, I need to classify my data. So when you say that you are using some models, then the solutions can be built with a lot of algorithms. So each one of you know that, okay, people talk about machine learning, people talk about data mining, right? And people talk about, nowadays, we are talking about deep learning, right? And there's other trend also coming up very, very promising, which is transfer learning. right? So you want to develop a model which can actually take a data which is coming from sensors like this, which is part of an IoT application, and we are interested in classifying the data. Here, the fundamental question, you as a researcher or a project student, right, or of doing a project, should ask a question saying, is there any ground truth data available for this? Is there a ground truth data that has got captured with 4 to 5 sensors like this? Has it been classified, right? So there you are asking for one important question in the data. Is there a ground truth for the data, right? So once you have a ground truth for the data, then you have to choose different algorithms. If you do not have a ground truth, right? Now our answer is now, no, I do not have a ground truth. Then what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to pick one algorithm which will go from the unsupervised model, right? If you do not have a ground truth for the data, you need to take an algorithm from unsupervised model and you'll have to develop your algorithm and model it for the given data. So example of an unsupervised algorithm would be a k-means algorithm, right? A k-means algorithm will be a best algorithm for you to choose for an unsupervised algorithm, right? Okay. Now, assume that we are running through unsupervised algorithm with k-means, then the next question it will be asking against the data is, what is the value of k that you are asking, right? K as such indicates the classes that we want to have. If you assume that the data is going to be classified as only 2 classes, then you're going to fix your value of k to be 2. If you're going to say that, no, I'm going to have 3 classes in my data, then you're going to say k is equal to be 3. So k corresponds to the number of classes, right? Are you going to have a single cluster or are you going to have multi-cluster in the problem? Let's take a case. You say that I'm using k-means. I'm saying that I'm fixing a value of k as 3. Now what happens is when you run the algorithm against the data, now this algorithm will start giving class labels based on the data that you have, right? So now I'm just showing you a sample, assuming that k-means is going to run on this data, it's going to give me a class label like this, right? Okay. I'll show you a demo also based on this. Now our understanding is I do not have a ground truth data. So I ran through k-means. Now my k-means is giving me class labels as 0, 1, 2 here. So I'm looking at class labels as only 3, but it's giving me more than 3 here. So let me put it as, again, this class label, I'm making it as 1, 2, 3. Yeah, fine. So we'll have it as 1. Now there are 3 classes in the data. So against the 3 classes, I have classified my data here. This process is something called as classification, right? This process of using an unsupervised algorithm to the data is called as something called as classification. So I have a data, I don't have a class label. I want to classify my data. So I'm doing something called as classification, right? Now, the next question somebody would ask is, see, this data generally can be in 2 cases. One case is a data where it is static. That means I have a data like this. I'm doing some models on the data. Other way of looking at the same data would be is like I have data which is coming live. I want to classify my data. How do I do it? There you can actually go for something called as real-time k-means algorithm. I'll show you on the internet. If you go to the internet and type real-time k-means, you'll get algorithm for real-time k-means, which will actually say, you can see here, no? Air pollution analysis using enhanced k-means. You will have, real-time k-means for color images, k-means in real time, right? You will have algorithms that are slightly modified from k-means for real time. So if your problem is going to have a data which is going to come real time, please take a real time k-means algorithm, right? So I'm just putting it here for your understanding. You can actually use k-means or you can actually use real time k-means, right? Now your solution is ready. I have a data, I don't have a class label. Now I am using k-means or real time k-means and I'm fixing the value of k. Now, k value that is being fixed here is actually fixed using a user's choice. I can say 3, I can say 2, I can say whatever value that I want. But the other alternative would be is like you can use algorithm from the internet for fixing the value of k. There you have an approach called as elbow method. Okay, so if you go to internet and type elbow method for k-means, you'll be able to get the value of k using the elbow method, right? So this is another theory which you can all go through. So answer before you is like fixing value of k can be done by using elbow method. Code is already there. You are not doing any code here. You need not write code for it. Now, I have an IoT data like this. I have classified my data. Then the people will ask you how many classes. So there, the question would be is like, is it a single class or is it a two class, or is it a multi-class, right? Single, two, or multi-class. So what is this here? Single class in the sense, let's take, if I ask you a question, is it hot or cold? You would say, I know only hot. So I know whether it is hot or not hot. That's all. I don't know anything about cold. So there you are actually formulating a problem to be a single, uh, right? But it's a two class problem. You would say that I know hot and cold. So I'm distinguishing as hot or cold, right? If you say hot, cold, warm, then you are formulating a problem as a multi-class. So most of the problems will actually start from single and it will become two class problems and then it will go for a multi-class situation, right? So classification, when you're giving a class label based on the class label value, you can actually say whether it's a single class, two class, or whether it's a multi-class problem here. Now, taking it forward, right? Now you have a data, you don't have a class label. So you have used k-means for doing the process. Now the next question somebody would ask is, okay, what about now this data is ready, right? Now this data is ready for analysis. Yes, this data is ready for analysis. Now the question would be is like, what is analysis here? Like usually from my experience with my limited knowledge, I'm saying you, when you say something like analysis, right? Okay, so one is like anything that is going to be giving you some sort of inference is called as an analysis, right? If I say you how many instances of data is captured, right? If I ask you, then you would say immediately that from the Excel sheet, it is 7, right? 7 records, right? So it is something for us to do something called as analysis. So if I say what is analytics, right? If I ask you a question saying that is the plants growing, right? Well, right? The plant's growing well. To answer to this, one option would be like you can take the class label, right? And you will say that, yes, see class label 0, class label 1, right? Class label 1. So let us take it as 1, 2, then the next class label would be 3. Fine. So 1, 2, 3. So maybe I will try to say that wherever I got a class label as 3, you know, I would assume that the plants are growing well, right? If that's the answer here, then you would actually go back to your Excel sheet and see that, see, there are 2 places where I got 3, right, out of 7, right? So I can give a proportional value saying that it is the plants growing well? You can say that, yes, it looks to be, right? And you would say that it is 2 by 3 cases, it is growing well, right? So this is what is something called as analytics, right? Okay. Now the analytics as such will become very challenging in a different perspective. If I ask you saying that why is the number of plants growing less, right? If I ask you a question, to answer to this, you will have many answers. You'd actually say that there has been a monsoon, right? And somebody would say, no, that it may be because of the fertilizers, right? So this is where all this data modeling becomes very challenging. So you will have to start increasing your data, right? Whatever data that you have been looking at. For example, you would actually go here and see, okay, sensor is fine, but what about the data with respect to the plants, right? So can I have some values with respect to sensors related to fertilizers, right? So can I have some sensors which will give me some details of fertilizers, right? Which I have in my field, right? So this is also now taken up in the understanding of agriculture. So I say sensors for fertilizers. You would actually get some sensors, no? You can be seeing here, right? FINA sensors, right? They actually give you online non-destructive moistures with respect to the fertilizer in what you are using for the plants, right? So like this. So now what I'm trying to show you is like, you know, the more the questions you ask on the data becomes larger and the data keeps on increasing. So once data keeps on increasing, now the question is like the data is larger. So naturally I need to look at models which will give me classification properly. That's the challenge, right? Okay, so when you build something like this, what you are doing is you are trying to develop a model, right? What you're trying to do here is you're trying to develop a model for your problem, right? So I now have a model. So what I'm saying to my model, I'm saying that I built a model with k-means, right? Or you would say that, no, I built my model with real-time k-means. Fine, I'm using k-means or real-time k-means through which I'm able to classify my data. Now, when you do like this, then the next question that somebody would ask is, okay, all this is ready. You didn't get a ground truth data. Now you have a ground truth. will it work on a test data, right? Test data in the sense now there is a model that you've created. Can you take this model to some other place, right? And can you show that yes, it is working properly or not? There on the place where you're trying to check, it becomes a data which is a test data, right? Now your inference would be going slightly different. What you would say is this data that you have already got, right? You already have a data here, right? So you would actually say this data to be a training data, right? You would actually say this data to be a training data. So then after you would start asking, what about my test data, right? Test data is what I'm getting live from my sensors, right? So here time aspect would also be required. So I would say that, okay, let's take it's 10:20, right? Onwards, I'm trying to take some live data. So when I'm getting some data, let's take like this, data is coming live from the sensors, right? Now my question would be is like, what is the class with which it belongs, right? This is where what you're trying to do is actually called as prediction. So I'm interested in predicting the class to which this data relevant to temperature, moisture, humidity, right? The sensor values fall into. When I'm trying to do a prediction here, I need to use some algorithms which I have from supervised because I already have a classified data using k-means, right? So I will use an algorithm which is coming from supervised. Maybe I will try to use a k-means KNN algorithm, right? And I would say that yes, I'm able to find my class label. So I would say that class label would be either 1, 2, 3, right? It will come into any of the three because the ground truth is saying it is falling into any of the three class labels. So let's take I get it as 1, right? Now let's take I get my second data coming live, right? So I have some values. So the values are coming for me. Now what I would like to ask is, okay, what is my class to which it belongs, right? Okay, so I'm using a KNN algorithm. So assume that the KNN algorithm is not able to find the class to which it belongs. Generally, it should say 1, 2, 3, right? But here the challenge is it's not able to find the class to which it belongs. So there, what you understand is this data actually becomes something called as an outlier, right? This data becomes an outlier, right? It is not able to classify. So one answer which research people generally suggest is they would say that, okay, this is an outlier. No, just take this data to the k-means, right? Just take the data to the data here, right? Fine, run it and see. You might get a new class label, let's take called as 4, right? Then if you get a similar data like this, right? Let's take with values like this. Okay, it might say the class label belongs to 4. So the solution which I'm keeping to people is if you get a data which doesn't fall into the class label to which it belongs in the unsupervised approach, that's your k-means, take the data and then run it with k-means. I got a test data, it's not getting classified. I'm taking it to the training data, checking the class label. I might get a new class label as 4, right? I'm following the data into the same class label as 4 here, right? This is the next input for everybody here, outlier analysis, right? There are many approaches for outlier handling. One approach which I'm showing you is this, right? Now, each one of you would know that, okay, I have some data from IoT, okay, no problem. I can use a k-means. If it doesn't have a ground truth data, I can run a KNN to check the class label to which it belongs, right? This is the input for our discussion here, right? Our discussion here would say that, okay, if this is all possible, what can deep learning can do? It is interesting for everybody to understand that deep learning has been the way for people to work with problems nowadays. You give any problem, people generally suggest, okay, you can go for deep learning. But usually the way of looking at understanding would be is you have to check whether your problem is having some sort of a stochastic property, right? So you have to check whether the problem is having some sort of a stochastic property. Stochastic property answer would be is like whether it's a time varying problem, right? For example, if you leave IoT, you would say that stock market is an example of a time varying problem. Then if you come to agriculture, where it's a precision agriculture, you will agree with me that it's a time varying problem, right? Okay, so stochastic properties is there, then you can actually look at deep learning there. Next is if the data is going to have a lot of challenges for accuracy, I have to accurately classify, right? Only then I can make a good decision there, right? There you can go for deep learning as a solution. The third, as usual, general answer people usually suggest would be is like the data is big, is having a lot of features, it keeps on increasing in features like what we told you here. Naturally there, your solution would be is like you have to go for something called as deep learning here, right? So this is some things which I'm keeping you as a quick hint for all of you to understand. Right. Now, the next thing somebody would ask is, all this is fine. I want to do something with cloud, right? And I want to make analysis here. Yes, it is possible, right? Okay. So let's take, I'm looking at the same thing in terms of a cloud here. I want to take it into a cloud setup. Then the answer would be like somebody would ask, okay, what is the software should I use for cloud? Right. So answers to that would be like you should actually use some softwares which are basically proprietary softwares, right? So here people will say that I'm using some softwares which are like Azure. I'm not promoting any product. I'm just giving an example, right? You can try to say that I'm going for Azure, right? Otherwise, people say that no, I want to go for something in open source. Then the answer would be like you have to go for Hadoop or you have to go for Spark, right? So in all of this, the interesting thing is like you can keep your data posted, right? And the data can come up to the server, and from the server you can access from the with the client nodes whatever you want to analyze. That is whatever models that you're creating, no, you can actually run the model in the client node and you can process it and get back the results, right? Okay, so if you ask me a question, what you are trying to do here, it is answer is very simple. You are trying to classify your agricultural growth, right? So that code that you're running for agricultural growth will be the code that will run on the client nodes against the data, will give back some results, right? So what is interesting here is people generally ask, okay, what might be the advantage you would get here? It is said already that a framework that you're using for cloud, right, has some capabilities to handle large data. That means it can handle data streams, right? It can handle your data streams, right? Okay, so since your framework can handle the data streams, there is a lot of possibility for you to have some advantages from the cloud. What would be the advantages would be is like one is transparency, as each one of you would have heard from the experts. Like that means that if I have multiple operating systems, I have multiple softwares working together, all of this will work together when it is on the cloud framework. So this is something called as transparency here, right? Then the second one that you would start understanding here is it can handle data of large size, right? Because it will be taking the data into its own file system. So it will have a file system, which is your HDFS file system, right? The third would be is like, okay, all this is fine. What is the next advantage I might have would be is like, it has the intelligence to understand that whenever there is a server error, right? Right? Or there is a client error, right? It will have automatic capabilities to handle the load, right? So load management is very strong when you come to the case of cloud, right? So these are the three reasons why people talk about taking data to the cloud and then trying to model the data with the cloud. Okay, now you would have understood, okay, I can actually use a software which can be from proprietary like Azure, or I can use Hadoop or Spark, right? The advantage would be is like I'll be able to get transparency, network transparency or software level transparency. I can handle large size of data. I'll be able to handle the errors which are going to happen in the client and server. And last, indirectly, it supports concept for load management, that is basically handling data at a larger size, right? Now, fine. Now, the next question somebody would ask is, okay, all this is okay. How do I put it onto the cloud? So there, the question would be is like, what is a programming language that I should be using for? So we are now coming to the programming languages for open clouds. One language which all of you know would be is Java. Second language which people can use would be Python, right? Along with this, there are many third-party languages which are there, which can actually work with cloud, right? So you can actually say, I'm using Java with cloud. I'm using Python with cloud. I'm able to explore the capabilities of cloud for my data that I'm trying to analyze. Okay, right? Now, the next thing that we will actually look at is the programming part of how to make everything possible. I have shared a document which has got all the libraries. So the quick inputs would be like there are certain libraries which are part of cloud, which you can use it for developing your problems. One is like you can make most of the codes in your third-party framework. So the third-party framework could be either built on Python or it could be built on Java, right? Now let's come to the discussion part of the code, right? Now what we are going to do here is the code part. Now the input is like we want to work on code. So naturally the next question would be is like, what about the data, right? That I'm going to have. So if you go to the internet and type IoT dataset, you'll get a lot of data sets that you can actually have for cloud analysis, right? You can see here around 25 data sets you will have for deep learning alone. That means for IoT with deep learning, right? So there are many data sets. You can take your own data sets, which is more relevant to your problem, right? So nothing stops you from taking a data set. So you can take your own data set, which is there. So I've taken one sample data set. With that, I will try to show you the analysis in the code part, right? Now, let's come to the discussion here. See, when somebody says, I'm interested in doing some sort of analysis or analytics, then the next question from the people would be is like, the data that you are trying to formulate and analyze can be represented by using a model, right? So your model could be done by using a k-means with KNN, as I told you, or you can actually take approaches from deep learning also. So let's see quickly about what a deep learning can actually do. A deep learning, as each one of you know, it's also a subset of machine learning that will use a neural network to learn from any unstructured or unlabeled data. What is unstructured or unlabeled data is, just now we have seen an Excel sheet. No, this is an example of unlabeled data. I think people know this, right? Originally, we didn't have any class label like this, right? It is not having any label. So it is an unlabeled data. Otherwise, unstructured is if you have the same Excel sheet data in a text file, right? It doesn't follow any structure. So there you say that it is an unstructured data. So deep learning is more for data that are unlabeled or unstructured data. Now, the input would be is like people have to understand deep learning has got supervised and unsupervised approach. As I told you, it is for data which is larger, it's for data which is demanding higher accuracy, right? And the next question somebody would ask is deep learning a solution for all the problems? No. Usually I suggest to people that regression is a very good solution to most of the problems. If you can look at your data and if you can see how much is the data varying, your data will be naturally a continuous data, right? Based on the continuous varying characteristics of the data, you can either go for regression or you can go for some other approach. So please keep this point always in your mind, right? If your data is continuous varying, right, and you just check it up how much it is continuous varying, based on that, you can either go for regression or you can go for approaches which are based on machine learning or deep learning also, right? Then before we step into the next part, we need to understand the crunch of how deep learning generally works, right? Deep learning architectures, you know that the primitive architecture would be CNN, that's a convolutional neural network. But there are other architectures also which exist, right? But almost every architecture will resemble to what happens in a neural network, right? This is a theory which will strengthen your understanding on deep learning. Please listen. I think you'll get it understandable well. See, all data that you're going to formulate in your problem here, you're going to represent as neurons, right? Okay, so there are going to be some inputs to the neurons. Assuming the input to the neuron in a simple way would be like x1, x2, x3. So if I give values for x1, x2, x3, assume that the values are 0, 1, 1. You add it, what happens? 0 plus 1 plus 1. That means 2, right? So if you are setting a threshold as 0, then automatically what happens is 2 is greater than 0. So the output will be 1. Now the next question is, what is the weights that you're going to give for this inputs? So it is W1, W2, W3, right? So when you give this weights, then the next question would be like X1 into W1, X2 into W2, X3 into W3. So we are trying to formulate it as an equation. So we will say that XW plus B is nothing but bias, right? So what is the purpose of bias? We will start seeing it later. But parallelly, you can keep it as a linear function, assuming to be y equal to Ax plus B. right? So if it's a linear function, you know very well, no, you will get only two values, either up or down in the output side. And keep these keywords for discussion: forward propagation, backward propagation, gradient descent, perceptron. So this is a representation for a perceptron here. Now, the next question would be is like the activation function. As far as activation function is concerned, the formula would be A is equal to F of summation of I to equal to 0 to N, Wi Xi, right? So it's W1 X1, W2 X2, W3 X3 in the previous case, right? Okay. And this will have a value to be expected to be 1. So let's take, we say 1 into B, right? So the input is x1 to xn, that is x of xi. X0 is nothing but the bias. Usually we'll have a positive value for bias. So we are saying 1 into B here. W is nothing but the weights. So we will call the weights as W0 to Wn, right? And F is nothing but the activation function. So here the difference would be is when you look at deep learning and other architectures, let's take neural network. Neural network will have mostly as linear activation functions, but deep learning will have non-linear activation functions more, right? Now, what we are going to discuss next would be is the understanding of deep learning here to the problem. So this data that we talk about here, right, is having a lot of neurons. But see the difference here. This is the input layer. This is hidden layer. This is output. This is from neural network. Now come to the deep learning side. This is input. This is output. And in the middle, what you see is hidden layers. But at least by visualization, you can assume that there are many hidden layers in the problem. And all of them are interconnected, right? This is a strength of deep learning to the problem. So the deep learning as such will give you a theory saying something called as feature learning. That means it can learn the features. How it can learn the features? With the data that you have, each neurons in the hidden layer will learn, and each neurons will interconnect with the other hidden neurons, and you will try to make them also understand what they have learned. So this is a complete level of abstraction, right? So the more the number of hidden layers, the better is the learning here, right? Okay. Now, next question would be like about the parameters that we'll have for deep learning. Normally we'll have the parameters under two keywords. One is parameter and next is called as hyperparameter, right? Parameters means values which are not set manually. So example would be the optimization algorithms that you're going to use, right? So the hyperparameters would be values which are set manually in the problem, right? So hyperparameters will be tuned by using an approach called as hyperparameter tuning, right? And what is the advantage of parameters is it will allow you for making the predictions. Example of hyperparameters, you can see here, model rate, number of epochs, hidden units, hidden layers, activation functions. All these are examples of hyperparameters. So when you start working with deep learning for a problem, here it is an IoT based application, you'll have to assume that, okay, I'm going to choose a set of hyperparameters and manually set it in my problem. And parameters will not be set manual. They'll be estimated using some algorithms like you can see here, gradient descent, ADAM, ADAGRAD, like that. Now the next one would be like given some data here, as I told you, you will actually have sometimes outliers coming up. And that is one side. Other side would be like you will have problems landing into underfitting and overfitting. What is underfitting would be is like we are actually taking a data and calling them as a training data. I think people know already, right? I have a data like this. I'm calling this data to be a training data and I'm running through my algorithm. But if you have created a model, right? But it works for the training data, but it cannot take a new data set that is coming. That means your model as such is not perfect, right? As I told you in the previous example, my data model is working correctly, right? I generally told that it is possible to work. But when I got a new data, it became an outlier and I'm trying to add it to the original training data and try to check the data against the model. So there I say that the model falls into an underfitting situation. Next one is overfitting situation. Overfitting situation in the sense when you are trying to take the model that you created and check against the test data, right? What happens is it is not able to fit the data that is being provided. So that means it cannot handle the future observations that is going to come up. So every problem might go into overfitting or underfitting. So approaches to handle overfitting is one, you can do cross validation. Cross validation is you can split your data into training and testing. Here at this point, people should know very well that if I have records like this, right? Okay, let's take, this is my record. I don't have any class label. Okay. Now I want to do classification and prediction. So there, the solution would be is like you look at the count of the data. How many records you have? You have 7 records. So you do 70% of training. That means 5 records you do training and 2 records you can go for testing, right? So the training testing split ratio is what I'm keeping for discussion here. You have to create a training testing split ratio, but the training split ratio can be at 70-30 percentage or 75% 25 percentage. You can vary this training testing split ratio and call it as cross validation. Next is you can increase the number of data wherein overfitting is handled. The next one is you can keep the data differently at different time, right? What is data different at different time would be is like you can vary the sampling times. Here you are saying the time intervals is 9-1, 9-2, 9-3. Somebody would say, no, I got 9-1, 9-2. Now, but I will now go for 9-5. Right? See the relationship, right? Between these two here, it is 9-3, 9-5. So at a time interval of 2 minutes. So the sampling time can be varied. Based on that, you will have a different data coming up, which is data augmentation. Then you can actually try to reduce the number of parameters in your neural network wherein overfitting can be handled. Last one is people talk about approaches which are more popular in algorithms. So you can go and check for algorithms which are towards boosting classifiers. If you go to internet and type AdaBoost classifier, right? There's a very popular classifier here. So if you go and check AdaBoost classifier for IoT, you will get your classifier for AdaBoost for IoT network, right? So this is other possibility here. You can look for classifiers which are relevant to banking and boosting. Now let's see how a neural network works manually. This one you have to know so that you are able to understand how deep learning works, right? Now let's take your data. Your data is now like this, right? This data is your vector. So here as such, what you have is your input. What you're expecting is a Y, which is your output, right? So Y as such is your output in the sense corresponds to the class. Here we'll have 2 classes. So the class labels are 0 and 1. So here we have these 3 records. We are expecting these classes to be 0 or 1. So randomly we have populated the class labels as 0 or 1, right? Next, what we are trying to do is we are trying to initialize some values for the weights and bias. So there is some initialized values for the weight. There is some initialized values for the bias. Now, this is your expected output weight. This is your expected output bias. Next, what we do is we apply and calculate the hidden layer input. How is hidden layer input is given as? Hidden layer input is given as a dot product of X into WH plus B. So you'll be able to get the hidden layer input. Next step, what we want to do is we want to calculate the hidden layer activations. So the hidden layer activations is given as sigmoid of hidden layer input. Okay, 1 second. Yeah, excuse me. Let's continue the session here. Now, what we are interested in calculating is the hidden layer activations. Hidden layer activations is given as sigmoid of hidden layer input. So hidden layer input is already calculated from the previous step. We have seen hidden layer input. Now, when you apply sigmoid, it is 1 by 1 plus exp of minus x, right? So we have got the value already here. So 1 by 1 plus exp of minus x will give you the hidden layer activations. Now the next step what we do is we multiply this hidden layer activations into W out. Then we add it with V out. We will be able to calculate the equivalent output. Now the output is right now available. Now the understanding is we have now completed the first step of forward propagation. Now we want to classify our IoT data into class label like this as 110. But as per the forward propagation, that is one epoch forward, we got the classified labels as close to 0.79, 0.80, 0.79. But we should have got it as 1, 1 and 0. Now what we do is we find the difference. We say 1 minus 0.79, 1 minus 0.80, 0 minus 0.79. You will get it as minus 0.79. Now this is completing your forward propagation. Now going forward, what we do is we go to the next step where we want to start doing the backward propagation. This is a crunch of all your learning models. When you go for the backward propagation, if it is a neural network model, what happens in a neural network model is it will try to take all the weights and it will try to obtain it to the model. But if it's a deep learning model, it will not take all the weights. It will take the weights only which has participated to the learning, right? So that's the crunch of what deep learning does. So now what you do is you got the difference between the value of y and your expected output. Then forward, what you do is you start calculating the slope of your hidden layer. The slope of the hidden layer, there's a formula for it. This will be derivative sigmoid of what you got in your hidden layer activations, right? Then the next step would be is like you are interested to calculate your D output. D output is nothing but the delta output. Delta output is given as multiplied value of E along with your slope of your output layer. Last step, what we do is we calculate the error. Error component is also calculated by giving the same formula here. So the formula for the error would be is what we got from the D output, that's a delta output, right? Along with your W out transpose. What is this W out transpose is? We already have this value of W out. We take the transpose of it, multiply it with the delta output. What we get is the error at the hidden layer, right? Now the next step will go forward where we will calculate the value for the value at the hidden layer. That's a delta value at the hidden layer. We have formulas for that in neural network. I'm trying to give you a quick understanding. Next forward, what we'll try to do is we'll try to calculate the values at the bias, especially at the output, right? So we'll calculate the bias at the output layer. Then we'll calculate the next step. Last step would be is like we are trying to see what is the delta output, right? Now, once we have done it, we have calculated what is the learning rate. This learning rate is what is being provided as a parameter to the neural network model, which is calculated over time when you're going for the concept of deep learning, right? Now, with this, what completes is one step of what happens in neural network. That's your forward propagation and a backward propagation. So one step forward in forward propagation, we get the error. If you want to get a quick understanding, we got the error value. That's the difference between your Y value and the expected output, got arrived output. Backward propagation goes back and adjusts the values of the hidden layer. Can you go and see? All values will get adjusted at the hidden layer, delta value at hidden layer, bias at the hidden layer, right? And finally, it will give us what is the learning rate. This is how a neural network calculates. And number of times it goes, that is one forward propagation, one backward propagation, how many times it goes depends on the value of epoch that you're providing it in the model. The next forward would be is like, if this is going to be solved with deep learning, how does it happen? The crunch would be is like you will have to take the help of a CNN. CNN is your convolutional neural network. There are many architectures from deep learning, but the popular architecture is CNN that you can take for your problem. Now let's come to what CNN says. CNN says, I give you something called as layers. One is your input layer. Next is your convolution layer. Next is your ReLU layer. Then is your pooling layer. Last is your fully connected layer. So if you go to the neural network concept, what you have is the input layer and output. But between this input and output, you have convolution, you have ReLU, you have pooling, you have fully connected layers, right? Now let's see how a CNN takes the same data. Now CNN as such, the challenge would be is like it can take data only as an image. That means it can take values only as numerical values as like an image. So the next question would be is like an image. It's a square matrix. A CNN also will look for a data as a square matrix. So if you look at your data that you have here, right? So now if you ask yourself how many is the number of records that you have in your problem, this many is the number of records that you can feed to your CNN. So what's your size? You say it is 4 by 7. It is non-uniform. You will have to convert it to a uniform square matrix by padding with zeros. Please understand the concept. So if your data is not a square matrix, you will have to convert it to a square matrix because CNN takes everything only as an image, right? Now, this is your input image that you have, and this is your weight matrix that is fixed in the beginning. What is weight? Weight as such is called as filters. There are a lot of filters in the internet. If you go and check from the image processing perspective, you will find filters that you can use. So you can use any one filter, maybe a median filter is also an example. So input image and your weight that you have, that's your filter, you do a dot product. So how do you do your dot product is, this is your filter here. So you say 1 into 18 plus 0 into 54 plus 1 into 51 plus 0 into 55 plus 1 into 121 plus 0 into 75 plus 1 into 35 plus 0 into 24 plus
Plus
1
1
into
into
20.
204 weight.
Hello? Hello? Is there a question? Okay, right. So when you multiply and sum up the values, what you get will be is 429. Now you do the same thing by moving the weight towards the next 3 cross 3, next 3 cross 3, right? Finally, what you will be getting is a reduced image. Originally, if it is a 6 cross 6, you will get it as 4 cross 4 image here, right? Once all this is done, now the next challenge we have to have is, we are interested in saying how many number of iterations will it go? That is your epochs. Then the second challenge would be is like, how many steps will you go forward or backward? Now, for example, this is your weight matrix. I can move the weight matrix first in here, then I can move to the next by moving here. That means I have the stride value as 1. So stride will indicate the number of positions you are moving over the entire image. When it's image here, you should assume it as data. That's all, right? Now, when you say stride as 1, originally you keep here, then you move it here, then you move it one step down, right? Okay, so if you say stride is 2, just see the change here. You are originally keeping it here. Since the stride is 2, you leave 2 pixels up, then you are just placing it here, right? So stride can be n. N indicates the number of pixels at a time. So since it's a square matrix, you can actually move maximum to the value of n, which is your order of your image. Now, the next one that we talk about here is something called as a padding. As I told you, if it is a non-square data, you will have to take it as a data and you have to process it by providing padding here. So padding indicates will keep zeros. So if you take a data like this, now we have zeros around everywhere, right? So what is the advantage would be is the original data will not get affected at all. Now on this data, you can actually start applying your convolution operation, what we saw earlier, right? That's your dot product operation, and you can complete your convolution here. So padding is essential, but it's not compulsory, right? If your data is already a square matrix, you need not do padding at all. Generally, padding is done with problems which are basically on images. Reason is there are a lot of possibilities for you to have noise. So you can have zeros at the boundaries and you can say that padding has been completed. Now, the next one that we do here is something called as a pooling operation. What is pooling operation is, it will take every 2 cross 2 rows. For example, here, this is my data that I got after doing convolution. You take this 2 cross 2, right? Now take the maximum value out of it. You take the next 2 cross 2, take the maximum value. Here it is 856. Next 2 cross 2, maximum value is 913. Next 2 cross 2, the maximum value is 851, right? Now, if you can see here, originally we got around 4 cross 4 records, right? Data from your, after doing a convolution, after doing pooling, it is coming down to 2 cross 2. So what you are achieving here is something called as dimensionality reduction, right? Your data is now reduced, but still the information resembles the same, what you have in your original data. Now, this is the way in which you can express your output dimensions of your CNN. First one would be the filters. You can say how many filters you have used. For example, I'm using 1 convolution, then you say filter is 1, right? You can increase your number of convolution. That means you're increasing your number of filters. Stride as such is number of pixels that you move cross or down in a single image. The next is zero padding. Zero padding indicates the filling of zeros around the image. The last one is output layer, right? Output layer is after you run through your model for one epoch, what you will get in the output layer is what we are talking about, output layer here. Now, this is a formula for calculating the output dimensions. So the formula is W minus F plus 2P divided by S plus 1. So W is nothing but your input volume size. So if you have your image, assume your image is 32 cross 32 and it's an RGB image, right? So it is 32 cross 32 cross 3. So what we are saying here is we want to apply 10 filters, right? Each filter is of size 3 cross 3 cross 3 because we have an RGB image here. So we are trying to use
a filter size of 3 cross 3 cross 3 here. Single stride, that is SS1, no padding, that means P is 0. Now you apply on the formula, right? When you apply on the formula, what happens? W is nothing but 32, right? F is nothing but your size. So we have filters of size 3 cross 3 cross 3. So here it will be 3. As such, when you talk about P, no padding, so it is 0. When you talk about stride, we are setting stride to be 1. So apply on the formula here, you will get 32 minus 3 plus 0 divided by 1 plus 1. So answer would be 30. That means if you're giving an input image of size 32 cross 3, the output that you'll get from your CNN is 30 cross 10, right? Because this 10 indicates the number of filters that you have applied. So here it will be 10 here. So please keep this formula for your reference. Okay, now you would have got an understanding on how CNN works on the data. Now the next question somebody would ask is how does CNN will work on this type of data? Answer is like this. You can take every one particular column right here, and you can assume it as one data, right? So that means you have 4 neurons. So you can have like this, or you can understand data to be like this. You can take every row as one single data and you can feed it to a neuron and you can run it in your model, right? Any questions at this point before I go to the next part? Participants, any questions? You can put in the chat box also. Participants, any questions? Ma'am, am I audible? Any questions from your end? If there's no questions, can you put no so that we all understand, okay, we are traveling and learning. Participants, can you put no at least in the chat box? What is biasing? Okay, see, bias as such will actually be connected with every activation function, right? If you do not have bias, then naturally you will not be able to activate a neuron, right? And you cannot have any classification. Okay, can you show implementation? Yes, yeah, that will happen now. The next step forward. Any questions? Okay, I hope that's, yeah, fine. Okay, I've already told you that you can take your own data sets. There are a lot of data sets that are there on the internet which you can take. I'll show you one data set that I have taken. Yeah. If you go and type IoT Kaggle data set, okay, you'll get a lot of data sets that are there. So here you'll find this link, which is coming from kaggle.com, right? So in this, you will have data sets, which is there. So you can take any one data set that you want for working with your problem, right? It can be a very basic data set of sensors, or you can take your data sets for agriculture also, right? Now let's move on to the discussion of the coding part, right? See, generally when you want to implement something with deep learning or model development, you need some softwares. So one is you need Anaconda. So if you go to internet and type Anaconda for Windows, you can download that. Once you have installed Anaconda, then you will be able to have a prompt like this, which is Anaconda prompt. Okay, right? So this says that Anaconda is installed. Then the next question somebody would be interested to ask is, how do I start coding, right, to develop my models? So the codes as such can be done with Python, or you can use Java, right? Let's take you are using Python here. Then the answer would be like you will have editor, which is available. Editor is Spider. Okay, you will have an editor which is available, which is called as Spider. You have one more editor which is available, which is called as Jupyter. Right? You'll have one more editor which is available called as Jupyter. So the difference is like Spider as such will allow you to write code with Python, but Jupyter as such will allow you to write code with Python, but there you will write code as a notebook file. That's all. Then next one to be understood here is like people talk about what about the visualization part, right? So there are a lot of libraries that are there. So one library is matplotlib, which is there for visualization. So if you want to have matplotlib, it is very easy. You can just go to Anaconda prompt. Now I'm with the Anaconda prompt, so I can go and type pip install matplotlib, right? It will install the software, right? If it is not available to show you error, if it is already installed, it will show you a message saying requirement already satisfied, right? So installing any third-party softwares, you can actually do it directly. You can say pip install followed by the software name here. So the next after this, somebody would ask is like, okay, I'm interested in doing some sort of code. So what about my code part, right? So here you can use sklearn. Sklearn is a library which is built on Python. This will have most of the machine learning libraries. Like for example, if you want to use k-means, if you want to use KNN, AdaBoost, or if you want to use codes based on primitive neural networks, all that will be available here with sklearn. So even when you go to deep learning, you can use sklearn also, right? So sklearn is the next library that you need to have. So here as such, when you go to this, you can go to your Anaconda prompt, and there you can actually say, see here, I type pip install matplotlib, it's showing me requirement already satisfied, right? So if I want to have sklearn, same, you will type pip install sklearn, it will install, right? And now once all this is done, then the question would be like, I'm using deep learning, what is that I need special from deep learning part? So Keras is a one framework that you can use for deep learning. Along with that, you can actually use TensorFlow, right? Or you can use Theano. You can use Keras with TensorFlow, or you can use Keras with Theano also for deep learning. So it is up to you. You can either use any one of the things, right? Now, once this is the requirement, then you would ask, okay, how to install? Same answer for you all. You can go to your Anaconda prompt and you can type pip install Keras. Similarly, pip install TensorFlow. Similarly, pip install Theano. Okay, so it will install your framework for deep learning, right? Now you know the quick steps for installing your frameworks. Then the last question would be like, you need to make a small change in the file. So you'll have a file called as keras.json file. Okay, you'll have a file called as keras.json file. You will have to go to that file and do some modification. So this file will be created. If it's not created, no problem. You create a notepad file, call it as keras.json, and there you place this text. This is a default syntax, nothing to do from our side here. Here you can actually change the connectivity part. That means Keras will either work with TensorFlow or the Keras will work with Theano. So let's take, you want to make it to work with TensorFlow, just say TensorFlow here. So the backend can be TensorFlow. So this says that I'm trying to use Keras with TensorFlow. In case you say that, no, my application is going to work with Keras and Theano, there you go and say that Keras and Theano. That's all. I'm again repeating, this keras.json file will get created when you install Keras. If it's not getting created, no harm. You make a keras.json file and place this text here, right? Whatever text that you have created, right? In this, make sure that you are changing this Theano or TensorFlow. Now, all this is done. Now it means that, okay, your environment is ready to start working, right? Now let's see a quick set of code, which I'd like to show you. So I'm taking some data set, which I have already got for your IoT application. So the data set is already available. So I'm taking this data sheet file, data.csv, right? This is one of the data set that I have downloaded from your Kaggle website. So you can also download the data set and keep it for your reference. Now the next question would be is like, I'm interested in developing models for it. And the answer would be is like, okay, what models you are interested in using? That's the next question somebody would ask, right? So let's take, I'm saying that I'm using k-means and KNN as a first step, right? So when you look at your code, the code generally will be like this. Each one of you know, I'm trying to talk some basics. It is a way in which if some beginner is attending, it will be helpful to them, right? So the first set of lines will be indicating the packages. So you need some packages, NumPy, Pandas for plotting, Matplotlib, right? Your data can be a CSV file. So you'll say import CSV. Then follow on to that, you will specify which algorithm you want to use. You want to use k-means algorithm, you say import k-means. Then you will be interested to use k nearest neighbor for prediction. So you'll say sklearn.neighbors import k nearest neighbors, right? That's your k neighbor classifier. Last one is the performance metrics that you need for the model. So any deep learning approach or machine learning or data mining, whichever you use for data analytics with IoT, you need to show some performance. So the performance is done by using precision, recall, accuracy, right? There are other metrics also are there, like F1 score is there. Then you have precision recall curve is there, right? That also we'll discuss more in detail in the afternoon session. The next, we have a data. So the data is already converted and it is now available. So we are just trying to load the data. Then at this point, important information would be like sometimes what happens is the data that you're trying to process all times will not be numerical values, right? So let's take, I say there is this an attribute called as category, right? Now, what would actually come up to the data part would be like people will say that the data is no more numerical value. The data is actually categorical value like this, right? So this is not numeric. I think people will agree. So now you cannot feed this data like this, right? And give it to the problem because it cannot take a categorical data. And the reason everyone should be agreeing that any algorithm will have mathematical formulas. So you cannot compare two categorical values. So you have to convert this categorical values into numerical values, right? So you'll have to convert this categorical value into numerical values. There, the approach people generally follow is there's an approach called as one-hot encoding. If you go to the internet and type, no, you'll get one-hot encoding, right? So you will see one-hot encoding approach, right? So the same thing we are doing here, we are calling one-hot encoder. That's a label encoder is a method. So whatever is a pre-processed data, we are calling label encoder. Then after that, we are trying to take the data and try to process. Right here, as such, what we are trying to do here is we are trying to first call k-means. Here we are specifying the number of clusters, right? Once we specify the number of clusters, it gets classified, right? It is equal to saying that I have an Excel sheet, right? But the Excel sheet doesn't have a class. Now I am running through a k-means. Now the k-means is now classifying my data into a respective class, right? So now the first part of the job is done, right? Then the next step would be like I want to run on a KNN. So when you run through on a KNN, the understanding would be like if this is my data that I have, right? This is my data that I have. Then the next question somebody would ask is, what about my data split into training and testing? I already told you that if you have a data like this, you can take 70% of the data for training and 30% you can give it for testing. So there is a training testing split ratio, right? So here you say train test split. Here you give test size to be 0.30. That means 30% is given for testing. Training will take 70%. Then what we are doing is we are calling this here. That is we take the object parameter for k nearest neighbor, that is neigh dot predict of the tested data. Once you are doing like this, what happens is it will try to run on the given data. Then it will try to plot as a confusion matrix, right? So this confusion matrix is one good example. These advantages like confusion matrix will give you one complete visualization of how much your classification is working properly. So confusion matrix, you can use it for machine learning. You can use it for deep learning also. So how will your confusion matrix will look like is like this. Suppose you keep the class labels. So the class labels are 0, 1, 2, right? And here again, you keep the class labels as 0, 1, and 2, right? You are expected to have the number of records being available. Let's take the number of records that you're trying to predict is 15, right? So number of records is 15, right? Now you take it to the model. What happens is the model should give you values like this, right? So this is an ideal confusion matrix. Why it is an ideal confusion matrix is you have values only along the diagonal, right? But if you have values like this, right? So it means that there is some misclassification, right? So how I am putting is, let me fill the remaining ones as 0 to make it visually understandable. Okay, so now if you look at this data here, if you look at this data here, so our data is like this. So what does it mean here? Class label 0 properly classified as 0 is 3. Class label 1 properly classified as 1 is 5. Class label 2 properly classified as 2 is 4. But class label 0 misclassified as 2 is 3 in number. So we are worried about reducing the number of misclassifications. So when everybody says that I'm improving accuracy using deep learning, transfer learning, or whatever technique that you're trying to use, the whole challenge is how will you reduce the number of misclassifications? So example of a misclassification is what you are seeing here. Number of records of 0 falling into 2 is 3 here, right? So can you use some other algorithm, or can you fine tune your existing algorithm in such a way that this is becoming 0 and this becomes 7? Right? This is an ideal example of a confusion matrix, right? So this is one of the reasons what people say is like every time you should use a confusion matrix to visualize your data. Right? Okay. Now, that's what you can see here. We are interested in printing the confusion matrix. Then follow on, what we are interested in showing is we are interested in showing what is the class labels that we want to analyze. So we are looking at two class labels here, class label 0 and 1. We want to give the performance of the class labels using KNN and K-means, right? Okay, so 1 second, I'm now stopping the sharing. I'll open the code. Just give me a second. Okay, now I'll share the screen. Share screen. Okay. So now this is another piece of code here. This is a code now I ported into a notebook file. Here you can see I'm loading the data which I have for the IoT here. So the data is data.csv. This is all same, right? Let's start running the code here. So now the data is available. So first we'll try run the code part. So now the packages are getting loaded. Then after that, what we are interested in seeing is we're interested in loading the data. Data is loaded. Then next is we want to classify the data. So we are classifying the data into 3 classes. So class 0, 1, and 2. So I'll have to run from the beginning. So first I'm loading the package, then I'm loading the data, then I'm loading the code for classification, right? So now the data is classified into class labels as 0, 1, and 2, right? Then after that, what I'm interested in doing is I'm trying to take the data, I'm trying to run through a KNN, right? To do the prediction part. Classification is now done using K-means. You can see here, right? We have used K-means here. I'm setting value of number of clusters to be 3, but as I told you, you can check the value of K based on elbow method also. Now I'm running through with K nearest neighbor. Then I'm trying to see the performance. When I run through with the performance, it says that there are 10,273 records, which are falling into the IoT data that we have here. Out of which 70% I'm taking for training, 30% I'm taking for testing. Now it has to predict a class. When it is time to do the class prediction, it will be using the concept of K nearest neighbor. So using KNN, it is now saying first row to be 1, second row to be 0, third row to be 2. It is something like what we started initially. So now when you run through a KNN, now my KNN data, it's saying first row to be 0, second row to be 1, right? So it will try to give the class label which it has predicted. Now, what is this actual output is, as I told you, you need to check whether your test data is classified properly or not. So you run through a K-means again on the test data and check whether the class labels are matching. If you see here on the test data with the KNN, the class is 1 for the first row. Class is 1 again with K-means. Class is 0 for the second row. Class is again with 0 for K-means. Class is 2 with KNN. Classes 2 with K-means, right? That means like this, when you compare, you can see whether there is any misclassifications in the problem, right? So then what we do is we write the code for printing the confusion matrix for the given data, right? So we will get the confusion matrix also. So once this confusion matrix can be now visualized, what you can say here is, you can say we are talking about 3 classes, right? 0, 1, and 2. So this is an ideal classification that is correctly coming. But misclassifications are coming here. Can you see? So choices, you can improve your k-means and KNN, or you can use some other algorithm against this data, and you can check whether this misclassifications can be reduced, right? Okay. So rest of it is all what we want to calculate for the precision recall, a precision recall plot, right? All these are visualization plots. All this is possible because here we are using something called as SEA kit plot. And next is matplotlib, right? All these are two libraries help us to give interactive visualizations. So this is one way. Second is people, as I have been saying, that we can use classifiers from boosting. Boosting classifiers also will give us some better results, right? So let's take one sample which we have got for the boosting classifier. So we will take one from the AdaBoost, right? AdaBoost is a very popular classifier. To give you a theoretical feel, what we generally say is if we have a lot of outliers and we want to reduce the number of outliers, we can actually use AdaBoost classifier. The code is the same, especially in the classification part, we'll use AdaBoost classification here. So we are using AdaBoost classifier here, right? Now we are loading the same data. You can see here, we are loading the same data which we got from the IoT data set. When we run through k-means, here we have printed the cluster distance for all of you to just get a feel. Okay, so cluster distances are printed. So now we got the cluster centers for each of the individual clusters, right? Then we run through with the AdaBoost classifier. And AdaBoost classifier requires some parameters to be compulsorily provided. Well, the one parameter would be the estimator. The second parameter would be the learning rate. All these are part of the theory, right? So please check the theory part of AdaBoost classifier. So once you run on the AdaBoost classifier method with the same data, what happens is it again predicts the output. So it is something like now you are using AdaBoost classifier instead of KNN to find the class labels, right? Here we are given it as 4 classes here. So the class labels are coming as 0, 1, 2, 3. Again, run the same data, test data on the k-means and check the class label. So you can see that some places it is matching, some places it might not match. Now the follow on would be like displaying the confusion matrix. Again, if you can see here, no, the confusion matrix is very interesting here because class 2, if you can see, there are many misclassifications, right? We have 744 instances misclassified incorrectly. It might come into class 3, right? If you see from here, and there are other places you can see here, this is misclassification 19, then class 2 misclassified as class 4 is 7, right? And similarly, class 4 is also having some misclassifications. So when you keep on talking about misclassification, and so on, people ask you that, okay, what is that you are interested in reducing, right? So please keep it in mind. This is one statement that you should always understand when you are trying to develop any model, right? So irrespective of the model that you have taken, your model should be able to reduce the false positives, right? So when you have some data for training, right, you will have some data for positive samples and negative samples. If you are using deep learning or k-means or whatever may be the approach that you have used, you should ask one question at last: have you reduced the false positives? If you reduce the false positives, but if your accuracy is less, that's not a worry. But reduction in false positives is very, very important for every model development, right? So here again, the question would be like how many false positives are coming up in the classification part, right? Once you have applied your AdaBoost. Last is we are interested in showing the performance metrics. So we are showing precision, recall, F1 score support. We are showing the equivalent values for the calculations also. So here your interpretation should be like what is happening to the accuracy part. If you look at precision recall, precision is only 0.39, 0.98 like that. You can take all this and average it in print also. Accuracy of the entire model with AdaBoost on this IoT data is only 74. That means 74% of accuracy. That means there is a scope for 26% of accuracy to be improved. That means by theory, you can conclude saying that this AdaBoost classifier is not better than what you have done with k-means and KNN on the same IoT data, right? But the interesting question, as I was asking you earlier also, is like, how much is the false positives? If your false positives have reduced when you've gone with an AdaBoost classifier, you can still conclude that AdaBoost is better compared to your k-means and KNN approach. Okay, this is second. Now the third one would be is like people will start asking, can you get a shift onto a deep learning perspective, take a neural network data. Yes, that's also possible. You can feed the same data as an example to a neural network also, right? So when you are trying to go for a neural network model, then you are trying to use deep learning perspective. So this is simple neural network. It's here we are not using any CNN. If you are using CNN, you will find convolution, pooling, all that. You'll find methods for convolution. So first part of the course will start saying that you are using something from Keras. So when you go to Keras on the internet, right, when you go and type keras.io, you'll get a link. So in this link, you'll get started. Click on this, you will find something called as developer guides. Click on this, it will start working to you about something called as sequential model. So if you want to start coding with deep learning, you will have to go from this link to understand the concepts, right? So initially you will have some codes for importing Keras. Here as such, what we are trying to do is we want to create a sequential model. What is a model in a new deep learning? A stack of layers, that's all. Stack of layers is a model. What layer? It can be convolution, it can be pooling, it can be a layer based on Bayesian, whatever it is, you can actually call them as layers with special functionalities. Now, the same way you can actually look at the code part also here. You are interested in taking a data like this, which is an IoT based data, and see how your neural network can work, right? So let's take through the code. Yes. So in the beginning, you'll find keras.models import sequential. Just now I told you what is a sequential. Sequential is a model. The next rest of the things are same. You want to take a data and to use it for training and testing, right? Now, next forward, if you see, we are trying to load the data, right? Then we are trying to use the data for training and testing. So here, what we are trying to do is we are trying to first create a sequential model. When you're trying to create a sequential model, it's a stack of layers. At each layer, you can specify the activation function. So for the first layer, you want to say activation function is ReLU. This is what I've been saying. An influence of an activation function will be dependent on the bias. ReLU is a non-linear activation function. ReLU is a popular activation function used for deep learning. Okay. So first layer ReLU, second layer ReLU, and third layer we are trying to use sigmoid, right? Now, once we are trying to run, we have to run from the beginning. So first we'll run by importing the packages. Then what we'll do is we'll try loading the data. Data is now loaded. Then we'll try to do the training, testing, splitting. Then we'll define the model. Now the model is created. Okay. Then what we are doing is we are trying to compile the model. This is what happens whenever you are trying to take a neural network model for the creation. You are trying to create a model. There you have to specify what are the parameters. So this is a primitive neural network model without any convolution pooling and all, right? So we need to specify what is the loss. We need to specify the optimizer. Do you remember, right? We told you that parameters can be estimated by using optimizers. Optimization algorithms like Kadan optimizer is there. What is the metric? We want to estimate accuracy alone, right? So we are now going compiling and creating the model. So once we go and compile the model, now the model is available for us, right? Now, if you see here, the model will be available as a model object. So we say model.fit. So here we say the value of x comma y. So what is this x comma y that we are trying to specify here is x comma y indicates your data. You can see here, right? X comma y is nothing but your data that we are taking here. So your data is provided. You specify the number of epochs, that's your iterations. You can specify the batch size. What is batch sizes? As I told you, you can take your entire data and split it into batches. Each batches can be given for the training part. So first you compile your model, then you fit your model, right? Then after that, you can actually go and evaluate what is accuracy here, right? So once we go and evaluate your accuracy, then automatically the model will actually run through the results. Okay, so this is the first part of the session, which I want to discuss. The first part of the session, I was interested in talking to people to understand if there is an IoT data, how can I look at my IoT data and how can I use algorithms? There the solution is you can use algorithms from machine learning, deep learning also. So what we have stepped into is the deep learning perspective of theory, and we have shown you the small output with k-means and KNN, then AdaBoost classifier, then with a neural network model. So afternoon session, we'll continue the discussion more on this part, right? And we will strengthen the understanding of using how CNN and other architectures can be used for IoT data for classification and prediction. That's all from my side. If there's any questions, please, you can take your questions. Participants, you have any questions?
Thank you, sir, for sharing your knowledge. Audience, if you have any doubts, please.
Participants, if you have any questions, please put in the chat box. Keras called as an API. I think people know very well that API means application programming interface. So here we are trying to interact by calling a lot of packages. So that's the reason people call it as Keras also. When you say something is available as an API, you can include it as part of the code. So in the beginning of the code, you can see, from Keras dot. That is the reason we say that Keras is an API. Is there any method for converting data into batch as set as batch size? No. There's no method for converting data into batch. You can actually give the batch size. If you say batch size is 10, it will split into the batch size of size 10. Then what is the ideal batch size? There is no answer to ideal batch size. It depends on your model. Every time when you run your deep learning, that's what we'll discuss in the afternoon. You'll be looking at the performance of the model with your IoT data, right? If it's not coming out very well, then naturally you have to go and modify the batch size. How matrix data is converted into images in CNN? What method is used? No, there is no method for converting matrix data into images. It is our visualization part, right? As I was trying to show you, again, I'll show you on the screen. Whatever is the data that you have, you will have to visualize your data and say it is a vector, right? What you will be trying to do is you will try to feed the data as a vector or an array list, right? You will have to say this is one vector, this is one vector, this is one vector, right? Okay, so it is this together, everything together is one image. That's all, right? Okay, so if you have 100 cross 100, right, then your understanding would be like you got 10 vectors. Okay, so image is visualized as a vector, same perspective here. Then next questions, anything? Shall we go for Colab? Yeah, we can also go for Google Colab because you might not get the computational aspect in systems. You can go for Google Colab. How is deep learning different from machine learning? It is only one answer is very simple. Like you will have to go into the uncertainty of the data. If the data is very uncertain, right? So there, machine learning is not very highly used. There, people go for deep learning. And next answer would be like if it is an unsolved problem. Now people are talking about IoT based COVID detection, right? Contactless detection of COVID diseases, right, in humans. There and all people are using deep learning because you can get a lot of accuracy improvement. Then that's the questions I can see here. Real-time example, any data that is an IoT-based data, like what we are trying to work, you can actually take it for the deep learning. Any other questions from participants? If there's no questions, then we'll stop here for the morning session. What is the NP problem and how it can be solved with using CNN? NP, I don't know. Are you talking about anything from NP completeness, ma'am? I'm not getting. Rupa, ma'am. Yeah, okay. NP completeness problem again. It depends. I think NP based problems we are seeing in NP with NLP in CNN. So if you have a long text or a corpus, can you recognize the text? Not all times, right? It's an NP problem. So there they are trying to use deep learning based approach. That much I know. I don't know more than that for the question. Any other questions? Okay, there's no For research purpose. I'm not getting, the question is not clear from Varishri ma'am. For research purpose means, I'm not getting the question. Okay, can we implement ID3 algorithm in deep learning? ID3 algorithm, yes. Yes, ID3, you are talking about decision trees, no? Yes, yes, it is there. You can implement ID3 algorithm in deep learning. In fact, now what people are looking at the strength is like you can use multimodal classifiers, like you can use k-means, followed by that you can actually use a CNN. K-means will give you the CNN centers, cluster centers, and wherein the CNN can actually get a more performance. So that's the answer for Sumita ma'am. Any other questions? Okay, if there are any more questions, please keep it also. We will discuss it in the afternoon. And that's all from my side, ma'am. And thank you for your patient listening, all of you.
Thank you, sir, for answering the queries. Dear audience, there is much more to learn from sir in the afternoon session. So let's take a break for lunch and join the session by 1:30 p.m. sharp. Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
ma'am. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. I leave now.